It's massive, it's modern, it's relentless. It's not your mother-in-law, it's the USS Gerald R. Ford. This is the newest aircraft carrier in the US Navy. It's the future of naval warfare. It comes in at 100,000 tons of steel and innovation. From stem to stern, this carrier is built to project power. With electromagnetic catapults, advanced arresting gear, and a redesigned flight deck, the Ford launches more sorties faster with fewer crew and greater precision. It carries the might of an air wing. Strike fighters, surveillance, electronic warfare, helicopters, ready to dominate sea and sky. Its nuclear heart gives it unlimited range. Its systems are automated, hardened, and battle-ready. But the true power of the Ford is what it represents. Command of the oceans, anywhere on the globe. This is not just a warship. It's a floating fortress, a political message and a promise. Where this ship sails, the United States is present and prepared. And now you can use it in sea power. Let's have a look at the Gerald R. Ford mod. Here she is in sea power, the Gerald R. Ford CVN-78. The mod gives you 3 different versions. You have the, let's say, vanilla version or the legacy version. In case you don't want to install additional mods, this is the one for you. But it does limit you to still having F-14s, A-6s, A-7s. Basically, you get the standard loadout that you might be familiar with from your standard aircraft carriers. So, in that sense, it is still a perfectly viable aircraft carrier. It just doesn't give you a whole lot of new stuff compared to what the other aircraft carriers give you. A notable difference, however, is the loadout of firepower. It carries 48 RIM 162s, also known as the Evolved Sea Sparrow missile, and it carries a bunch of the RIM 116 rolling airframe missile. Both of these are, of course, very much defensive oriented. They're not supposed to have anything close this much to the carrier. That's what you're aiming for, whether they be F-14s, F-18s, or F-35s. The second iteration is the Gen F Kennedy here, the CVN-79. Of course, you could use the other names as well. This one does have a different air wing, but it also requires sea lifter and anchor chain, as well as some other mods. It gives you a mighty flight deck with F-18s, an E-2C, and S-70Bs. What do these things do? Well, they got some nice loadouts. With the Ford, you got the option between the F-18E and the F. It doesn't really matter that much which one you pick, because these things have, as far as I could tell, the exact same loadouts. They can do the exact same things. So it doesn't really matter what type of wing you pick. From what I understand, the F-18E is the single-seater, the F-18F is the dual-seater. But in the game, it doesn't really seem to have any kind of an effect. So what kind of loadout do these F-18s have? Because, well, I can talk about the carrier at length, but it's really about what the air wing can do. That's where the firepower is. Take note, by the way, this thing carries 80 aircraft. That's a lot of striking power. Also, a lot of micromanaging power, depending on how well the game develops from here. So we got an air-to-air loadout, giving you a couple of sidewinders for short range and 120, sorry, not 120 missiles, 6 AIM-120 missiles, with which you can engage enemy aircraft at good range. I'm saying good, not fantastic. It's not a Phoenix. It's a 65-mile range, which still, especially for the era of sea power, is very good. Unless you give the opposing force, whether they be Russians or Chinese or something else, a better unit, you will very easily win the air war with the AMRAAM. Also available, a strike loadout, which still gives you some AMRAAMs and a Paveway 2. Strike long range gives you AMRAAMs, but also 2 harpoons, as well as sidewinders. So this thing can do a bit of everything, but I'd say it doesn't do anything very well. Maybe short range air-to-air is what it does well, but why would you? If you got a couple of wings or a couple of birds with the AMRAAMs with you, why would you need to rely upon either your own short range or your own short range sidewinders or your AMRAAM? I don't really see the point. Close air support gives you, again, your 4 sidewinders, 1 AMRAAM, a couple of Mavericks against tanks, and even some GBU-12s. So a couple more paveways. Please take note that the GBU-12, I believe, is a laser-guided weapon. Yes, laser-guided bomb. So you need to have something laze for you. You can do that yourself. These aircraft do have their own laser designator. And with that, you can certainly use your own laser designator and your own striking power. But if you are going to be doing close air support, you might want to also have an EA-18G with you. The Growlers, these things are capable of knocking out enemy radar installations, and that is going to make anti-air very difficult. They do, in their standard loadout, and their only loadout, come with a couple of AIM-120 AMRAAMs, as well as 2 AGM-88s. These are very much improved relative to the missiles that some of the older aircraft have at 50 miles. So with those, it is possible to, with certain Soviet warships, knock out their radar first, and then, well, if you're feeling optimistic, I guess you could go in with a close air support. I personally wouldn't recommend it, but it can be done. That is, if you have effectively knocked down not only the target's radar, but potentially all the escort's targets, or the escort's radars as well. Now, if you want to do a bit more air-to-air far from home, you're going to be able to get the air-to-air long range. The difference is, this thing doesn't get any drop tanks, and this thing does. So with those additional drop tanks, your range increases substantially, and you can still bring 4 AMRAAMs. You are trading 2 AMRAAMs for that additional flight range. You also, and I almost forgot about that, get access to the S-70B. The S-70B is a helicopter, and it can do ASW, making them very universally deployable against submarines as well as surface targets. Interestingly, the default loadout gets everything. I think they might be loading down this helicopter too much. You're going to be getting Hellfires, sonobuoys, torpedoes, and chaff. ASW loadout gives you the same, except the Hellfires, and the Strike loadout gives you more Hellfires. No, actually gives you the same amount of Hellfires, and everything else is the same. And the anti-ship loadout gives you the access to a couple of Penguins, with which you can strike targets, although at relatively limited range, 19 miles, so you better be sure that they either can't see you, or that they cannot shoot you because they simply don't have the weapons. Now, that is the second type of Ford. What about the third? The third is the one which is carrying F-35s. This bird has a lot more capabilities, the F-35C, in the form of a higher value of stealth. These things are much more difficult to find. Compared to an F-18, they're also substantially faster by 100 knots, and you get access to more modern gear, such as, for example, the Naval Strike Missile. If you thought a harpoon at 65 miles was bad, this thing is going to get you at far greater range of 130 miles. This means, with an F-35, you can start projecting power at far greater ranges, and that means you will actually be able to dominate more of the battlefield with this one aircraft carrier and a couple of F-35s. The F-35 gets a couple of different loadouts, such as this one. This is the F-35 air-to-air stealth. As you can see, the wings are entirely clean of ordnance. There's nothing being carried. The alternative is the air-to-air loadout full. This gives you more missiles. I'm carrying many more AMRAAMs. I'm also carrying a couple of AIM-9Xs on my wings. The thing about Sea Power is this thing is stealthy, but I have seen no discernible difference between a stealth value of this full loadout and the one which is completely clean. Both of these have an own radar cross-section which says very tiny, so I don't think that the game actually takes any of the ordnance into account. I think it only considers the aircraft itself. So with that, the loadouts that you have aren't that different. I would personally probably pick most of the full loadouts, because Strike Full loadout gives you a couple more ordnance than a Strike Stealth. Same for example, an anti-ship stealth or an anti-ship full. If I want to try and overwhelm the enemy's air defenses, I'm going to take not 2 naval strike missiles, but 6. Speaking of these naval strike missiles, what can they do? Let's have a look. The Naval Strike Missile has a range of 130 miles. That means that with that bird, you're able to exact a whole lot more firepower onto the surrounding area around the carrier. So you are much, much more capable of denying the enemy their airspace as well as sea space. And with that, you don't need to risk your aircraft at all. Of course, if you are so inclined, yes, you can still use an aircraft to go on a strike mission. That is dropping ordnance at short range, but I mean, it's not 1940 anymore. So, given that, I think it is actually a lot more likely you'll be using these long-range strike missiles. Don't risk the aircraft. Why would you? Again, though, unless you give Red 4, whatever they are, a lot more capabilities, these things are going to be completely dominating the area. Not only will you win the air war, you will also just destroy any warship that you see without really having to risk your aircraft. So in that sense, yeah, it's a very, very, very potent aircraft, but if you want to use it, I recommend you also install some mods to make sure the opposition gets a bit of a buff. Something else the Ford gets is this S-70 helicopter. The S-70 is a workhorse. You can do many different things with it. Typically, you get a couple of different loadouts, although there's also a default loadout. Now, starting with the default loadout, I don't like it because it's too strong. The default loadout gives this helicopter access to not just the torpedoes you can see mounted on the sides, but you can also carry 4 Hellfires in that missile rack off of its left flank. On top of that, it gets access to sonobuoys, and you are, I believe, given a dipping sonar. Because why not? So, this helicopter in an ASW loadout, yes, I think this is perfectly acceptable. You get 25 sonobuoys, you get 2 torpedoes, and you get some chaff. If you compare this to some of the other loadouts it can have, I think it's overpowered. Because I can load an S-70 out with Hellfires, torpedoes, a full sonobuoy loadout, and chaff. I can even go with a strike loadout, but that sacrifices the torpedoes. Or I can go anti-ship, which gives me a couple of penguins, as well as sonobuoys. So your helicopter might be able to help out with hunting submarines, but that's about the extent of it. It will be able to help. It won't be able to hunt. You might detect, but you won't be able to kill. As for the model of the aircraft carrier, the author did say this thing is kit bashed, which means it is not a custom model. And that means you are not going to be getting an exact replica of the Ford. This is apparently a mod of other warships combined. So that's why you can, if you inspect it closely like this, see some slightly odd textures here and there. Nevertheless, if you don't zoom in on the carrier too much, you won't notice that. One thing I did notice is that for some reason loading this thing in takes a long time. I'm not sure why, but my game took much longer than usual when I was playing a scenario with this thing loading in. So give the game a little bit more time if you are going to load in this aircraft carrier. As for installing the mod, you have essentially a few different options. You can say, I just want to have the base model, and I'm perfectly happily using this aircraft carrier with the older Sea Power aircraft. I'd say that's the least overpowered variant. It's also the easiest install, because you just subscribe to the mod and you don't need to do the installation for Sea Lifter and Anchor Chain. If you do want to use the more involved versions, including installing Anchor Chain and Sea Lifter, you're also going to be getting access to the Boeing FA-18 as well as the F-35 Lightning. So with those options, I'd say if you don't really feel that comfortable installing mods, just get the mod itself, just subscribe on Workshop. If you are perfectly happy installing a few more mods, which sometimes involve downloading and installing some things and moving those over to folders, get the other versions as well. So get Sea Lifter and Anchor Chain. Link down below in the description to downloading the mod, as well as downloading the other required mods and how to install them. Now, thank you for watching. Thank you to Maneuver Warfare for creating this model, and I hope you guys will enjoy using the Fords. Thank you for watching. I'll see you out there on the high seas.